like
You're more developer-y.
hacker. That's a good word.
WordPress
for it.
hacker.
Yeah, yeah. Like PHP and I don't really get along, so I wouldn't quite claim developer, but you can play with CSS and HTML and stuff. So front end more. So how many people are going a little bit crazy with this playing on screen? Me too. It was actually bigger and I resized it so it was smaller because I think it would make me a little bit insane before I started speaking. And if I have a hard time catching up, it's because I don't have my inhaler and I just ran across campus. So apologies there. But I'm all about site speed. I like to make websites fast, so that's what I do. So we're going to talk about site speed hacks that will make you money. And it's fun to talk about like code and all of these things that the interest. I mean, I assume, is everybody in here a developer? Is that a safe assumption?
DBA. I'm a DBA.
Okay. So yeah, but for the most part, I grew up with dial-up from like about 2000 to I think my parents got DSL like 2004, 2005, and then finally got cable internet in like 2010, right when I was like leaving the house. So anyway, child of dial-up, average site speed, just to get right into this, according to Google, this is 3 years ago, so it might be a little bit faster now, but from what I've seen, not by much. 6.7 seconds on desktop. That's definitely cringeworthy, but what's even worse is mobile. If you're on your phone and it takes 10 full seconds for a site to load, like that's bad. And the thing is that mobile users are used to desktops and laptops, so they've come over to mobile, and when they see a site that loads in 20 seconds, that loads in 3 seconds on their desktop, they're disappointed with that experience. And so Google has said that you guys need to be fast. How fast? 1 second is their recommendation on all your devices. So desktop, mobile, phones, it's really, really hard to get a site to load in 1 second. Like really hard. So we're going to talk about some things that we can do to do that. And why is this important? It's a ranking factor in Google search. It was 2010, I think, when they announced it, that it was going to be a ranking factor. They said it was going to be really small and minor. But just like this marketer said, and this quote is from 2011, he said, it's going to be more and more important, and I think that is the case. In 2014, there's a company called Search Metrics, and they released a study. It's a correlation study, so it's not definitive, but they found that one of the biggest correlative factors for a site to rank is site speed in terms of on-page optimization, even more so than like heading tags and things like that. That's a really, really big deal. And especially, are you guys familiar with the April 21st update that Google started rolling out? It's nicknamed Mobilegeddon. Basically, Google has altered their index a little bit so that the mobile optimization of your site is now a ranking factor within mobile search. So it wasn't, I think it kind of was before, but it wasn't maybe to the degree that it is now and will be going forward. I think that there's not a ton of change that's happened with that so far, but it's only like 2 weeks now. So I think that we'll start to see more and more going forward. But it's a big deal, and especially on mobile. If your site's not loading in 1 second, you're going to see a little bit of we're talking minor for site speed, but you're going to see a little bit of a decrease in ranking element. And then the other aspect of this is user experience. I mean, like I said, if you go to a site and it takes 3 seconds to load, 4 seconds to load, you know, that sounds really petty kind of to think about, but that's important to people, especially when they're used to that on their desktop devices. Just some little case study stats. Amazon saw 1%, oh, I missed a couple words there, 1% drop in revenue for every 100 milliseconds increase in the load time. So we're talking about like milliseconds, and they're losing millions of dollars. Like Amazon's $90 billion a year in revenue, something like that. So we're talking about like hundreds of millions of dollars. So obviously that's a big deal to them, and that's part of why Amazon Web Services exists. That grew out of their technology they developed to make their site faster. Walmart saw conversions on Walmart.com more than double when they went from 3 seconds to 1 second in load time. That's millions of dollars. Google saw a 20% decrease in search traffic with a half-second increase in load time. What they were doing is testing 30 search results per page instead of 10, and that increased the load time of the page by about half a second, and they lost 20% of traffic over the course of that test. Shopzilla saw a 12% increase in conversions, just A/B testing between faster and slower pages. Mozilla saw more Firefox downloads when they did A/B testing, where site load time was the only variant in the test. And then it's a small increase, but I just blame that on it being. So yeah, there's that. So let's make the internet faster. Choose an appropriate web host. So I say this all the time, and I have a few sites that I host on shared hosting. So you know, there's sites that I don't care necessarily if they're fast, but sometimes like you just need to have a faster site, especially if you're doing lead generation or e-commerce. Site speed is really important. Nginx generally performs better than Apache out of the box. There are things you can do to speed up Apache, but out of the box, Nginx tends to perform better because it asynchronously loads resources, where Apache by default does not. And this is kind of correlation, but I find that sites that are using newer versions of PHP tend to run faster. And I don't know if that has to do with the PHP, but I've just noticed that. And then when I say dedicated host, I mean like a dedicated WordPress host, like WP Engine or Pagely or one of those. They optimize their platform to go that CMS. So MySQL is optimized for WordPress. Everything runs faster. It's really, really good. And personally, the only dedicated host I've used is WP Engine, and I highly, highly recommend it. It's very, very fast. I can't say enough about that. And as with WP Engine, they built in a lot of infrastructure to their sites so they can handle traffic spikes. Technically, like WP Engine, Pagely, they're still shared hosting, but they've optimized their infrastructure so much that it doesn't feel like shared hosting. So I highly recommend that. And VPS, or Virtual Private Server, definitely works. I use that on one of my sites. It's a little more work because you have to do some of those server optimizations yourself, or hire someone to do it, which is what I did because I don't really know how to do that. But it's pretty awesome. So, and you know what? Give Scotty the work core that he needs to get stuff done. Something else you can do, and I know I'm speaking to the choir here. I'm just going to go through some technical things that you guys, some of you probably already know. Combine and minify your code. Does anybody know what that means that could explain what minification is?
So you combine all your files, say your JavaScript files, into a single file so that when you go to request it from the server, you don't have to make multiple requests and all the overhead of establishing those connections. And minify means compress your variable names, get rid of white space, get rid of comments, so that you're transmitting as few bytes as possible.
Yeah.
And you can add all that just right into your Maven build.
Yep.
So
it's user friendly to code with those spaces and line breaks and stuff, but that adds up and it slows down your server. So again, we're talking about milliseconds, but that matters when everything's combined. So you want to minify all the things. Something else that I didn't actually know about for a while is query strings. So like one of the biggest offenders, like in this example, is version numbering at the end of CSS and JavaScript files. This can slow down your site as well because all of those query strings, they have to process that when it's loading the site. Yes.
So I use query parameters for tracking.
Mm-hmm.
Does that inherently mean that anything that you're tracking is going to be slowed down as well?
Probably a little bit.
It's also important to note that while that's generally true, some CDNs handle that differently. Query parameters, according to the specifications, don't have to be cache busted. They usually are because people want to use them for things like tracking. But if you're running your own CDN and you use these to track versions or something, for example, you can often configure your CDN to cache that, to treat that as part of the cache key, so you can still use those and get the cognitive recognition that it gives you. But as a general practice, most people, most sites use those cache busting. And so it's going to have to go all the way to the server as opposed to being filled from your browser cache or somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thanks.
So yeah, get those out of there. Use a cache in CDN. I'm not going to go into that really, because I have some more awesome stuff to get to. But that's important stuff. Scripts, plugins, like just get rid of that stuff. The other thing is that on mobile devices, JavaScript, it kills load time. So if you can, like, if you have a mobile version, then avoid JavaScript there. But if you're using like a responsive theme, you can code it so that it's not going to load everything that isn't being used on the mobile iteration of that website. Most WordPress themes don't do that out of the box, so you might have to do some custom work on that, but I highly recommend it. Let's make things faster. So some of the other things that slow load time down are embedded content like YouTube videos, social feeds especially, even more so than YouTube videos. So like if you have widgets and things in your website, I would say minimize those. Personally, I don't think social feeds really add a lot to a website. I think they're kind of pointless. There's probably application occasionally, but I would just avoid it. And then advertising. I would recommend minimizing the advertising, and Google prefers that for search anyway, so it's a good thing to do. Obviously, if you make all your money from ads, it's kind of a balance, and you have to figure out how do I balance that. And I kind of look at site speed as a budget. So Google's giving me 1 second, and you have to figure out how do I optimize and balance all of this stuff to fit in 1 second. So if you can make some really awesome gains in other areas, then you can justify ads slowing your site down, and that's fine. Personally, I don't know if you can get to 1 second with ads on your site, but you can try. I've never actually done that, but it's something to consider. Google fonts. Now, Google fonts are awesome. I use them on all of my websites, but some of them are slower than others. In Google, when you look in the Google Fonts interface, there's a tool that tells you how much it's going to add to your load time. So I recommend looking at that and considering that. The other thing is if you're using like italicized and bold and things like that, that's going to add to that load time because they're going to have to add those different versions of those fonts as well. So consider that as well. That being said, italicized and bulleted fonts are generally a better experience, makes things easier to read. So just consider those in your budget, your 1 second budget. Never, ever, ever hot link. It's rude, but it also slows down your load time potentially. So there's that. This is important. A lot of WordPress sites and WordPress plugins will add JavaScript in the header, and it makes me crazy, but it slows down your load time. Some of it is like gravity forms, part of that's used to render the page that's, especially if the form is above the fold, maybe you want that. And so consider which scripts you can move to the footer. Gravity forms, maybe you want that to render with everything else, and so you put it in the header, but as a general rule, put all JavaScript in the footer. And then if you have a ton of images, I would not use this if you don't have a lot of images, but if you've got like a Facebook news feed or something where you've got tons of photos, then lazy load is a good script to use for that. So this is what I get all the time. Somebody says, oh yeah, my site loads really fast. And then I look at it and it's like 4 or 5 seconds. Well, that might have been fast 5 years ago, but that's not good enough anymore. And this is the biggest culprit in site load time. After you've done all of this is going to shave off the most time in your load time. Choose the right file type for image compression. You've got PNG, JPEG, and GIFs. And don't recommend using GIFs. I think that's pretty good. Obviously, I like using them in presentations, but as a general rule, they don't. They tend to be bigger, especially animated GIFs. Like they can get pretty big, so avoid using them unless you're BuzzFeed and you have lots of money for server optimizations and CDNs and crazy stuff. So proper file type choice: PNGs and JPEGs. For photos, use JPEGs. For maybe web graphics, which I would minimize. Like if you can do it in CSS, do it in CSS. Don't do it as an image file. I know, especially front-end developers back in the day, build it in Photoshop and then slice it up and put it into a WordPress theme. Sprites. But that's a bad idea, especially now, because then you're using an HTTP request every time they want to load each of those images, and I'll show you an example of a site that's using tons of them and doing it reasonably well.
How do you feel about the use of font sets, font icons like font off?
Love it. Yeah. And for social media icons, things like that, it's much better because then you're reducing the number of requests, and it's way smaller to load that than it is to load 1 kilobyte images for each of those icons. I would recommend font icons.
Is SVG better?
Yes, also better because it's scalable and it's usually a really small file size. So SVG is really good as well. I just personally have a lot of experience building SVG, so I haven't done it, but something that I need to get into. I don't usually do all the graphic stuff, so I usually source that. So, yeah, that's also a good idea. And then this is the best thing ever, and I'll show you an example in a second. There's a Save for Web option in Photoshop and Illustrator. There's an extension you can also get for GIMP, speaking of open source, that does basically the same thing. Highly recommend it. On all of your web graphics, if you're using Ping, use a Ping 8. The exception to that is if you have a logo or something that has gradients or things like that where you need the 24-bit depth, then you want to use Ping 24. But generally use Ping 8. Yeah.
Does Ping 8 have the alpha layer, or is that just in Ping 24 for transparency?
It can do transparency, but if you've got like a gradient or something where it kind of fades into transparency, it doesn't do that.
I'm thinking more like you've got a circle and you've got the anti-aliasing on the edges there. Does Ping 8 handle that well, or is that going to be fading into whatever the background was when you were editing it?
No, it'll show the transparency. Yeah. Let's see. So these are some automatic tools you can use online. You can search for them. I haven't used these, but if you don't have the option in Photoshop or GIMP for some reason, then these are good. They're tools you can just use to upload your images. It'll compress them. It does a decent job. These are some things you can install on your server if you're running like a VPS or something. And they're good tools. I usually use them through another service. I don't use them directly, but you can do that. The downside is that then this is running on your server and could maybe slow down depending on how much RAM you have. So these are some automatic compression tools that use those other tools to compress it on the third-party servers and then put it back on your server. And both of them have WordPress plugins. WP Smush It is WordPress, but the View Image Optimizer is, they have an API that you can plug into. And it's $1 a month minimum for 200 images. And it's like, I think it's a penny per image on that. So it's really reasonable. I do use that on a few of my sites. So let's make sites faster. Anybody recognize this movie? That's right. So this is the best image compression option. The problem is that it can be a lot of work. But if you've got high traffic sites, you definitely want to do this. Especially like your landing pages, things like that, where people are coming in from search, and especially where you want those pages to rank well, you want to use really good image compression, and you're not going to get that with the automated tools. That's a typical file size savings with automated tools. Usually, if you know what you're doing, using the correct file type for the correct type of image, and I recommend just honestly playing with the compression settings and visually looking at the image and seeing what it's doing to see what are you losing in terms of image quality. But generally speaking, you can get 50 to 80% savings on file size. So it's a good idea. And that can mean, depending on your other settings, that could mean seconds in load time. Not just milliseconds here. This is seconds. So that's a big deal. This is a 3.1 megabyte image that somebody uploaded to a site that I was working on. And it was the homepage of the site.
Wow.
And so, I mean, the other thing is that Google's recommended page file size is 1.5 megabytes approximately. If you've got a 3.1 megabyte image on your homepage, you've gone way over that. Google used to not crawl the images as part of that file size, but they do now, because they want you to give them access to your CSS and your JavaScript so that they can render the page as a user would see it. They're looking at the images. So you need to compress for Google. This is the compressed version, and I compressed it all the way. You can see a little bit of...
Wait, can you do it again? Yeah, can you flip back and forth?
So that's it. That's compressed.
Might not be a big dimension,
But also on the site that was using this, it was a background image. So I was like, it doesn't need to be super high quality. It needs to be good enough.
Yeah.
And that's the file size. I did not crop it. I did not change the dimensions at all.
What's the dimensions?
It's 3008 by 2000.
It's huge. It's humongous.
So without changing the dimensions, I got it to this. But then I thought, well, it doesn't need to be 3008 pixels wide, because nobody has a screen that's going to look at it like that. And the maximum width of the site is 1200. So I cropped it, and I got it down to 72. So that's the kind of thing that you can do if you're optimizing. Now, obviously, not everybody has like.
If you
1
drop
megabyte
it
images.
to a black and white instead of, because it's basically black and white, there's a little bit of color there, but
Mhm.
you might be able to drop even further.
Well, and I did. I dropped it, I think it was like 16 colors on a ping 8. So I dropped down the colors because there's not, I mean, there's a little bit of grayscale with the snow. This is Mount Timpanogos, by the way. You don't really notice it though. It's pretty minor. I mean, there's a little bit of like the gradient. If you look up here, this is a bad projector. I can see it better on the screen over here. But where you kind of got that fading from one gray to another, there's a little bit of loss of the quality of that gradient. But again, background image, I kind of feel okay with that. And the client didn't notice. So, and their side loads like twice as fast, just with that change. The original, so on this website, I didn't bring a screenshot, but I can show you. The desktop version was loading in 8.1 seconds. It's now 1.1. And literally, like, it went from 8 to 4 just compressing that image. So image compression is a big, big deal. And this is like my little soapbox. Like, this is the thing. And I know that you guys, as developers, don't always have a hand in the images, but my hope is that you can encourage your clients and employers and people in the marketing department, people know what they're doing, to compress images. And even like get into Photoshop or GIMP and show them how to do it. Because it makes a huge difference in load time. And of course, makes your employer or your client more money because their conversion rates go up and user experience and rankings and search go up. So we don't want to do this to our users. So let's not do that. Okay. And this is connected, right? Oh, okay. I don't want to mess with that.
Sorry, I didn't realize that was going to be used here.
Okay, so another qualifying statement. This computer has 16 gigs of RAM. So, and I know that a lot of us probably work on computers with 16 gigs of RAM, or 32 maybe, a lot. But the average user doesn't. And so all the more reason we need to make sure that all of these things are done so that they're not blaming their slow speed on us. Anyway, and sometimes, people blame it on their slow computer, and that's nice of them, but it's kind of our fault sometimes. So here's a site that does image compression incredibly well. There you go. How do you read this?
I want to hire a car now.
Like F4.
Is there anything here that isn't an image?
Sorry?
I was just asking, is there anything here that's not an image? Go to that bottom
I
left.
don't know. When I looked at, so I did some speed tests on this.
How did you
3.9
find
seconds is the load time.
It's a really
What
popular
was the
second
second
K.
3.9
Yeah.
seconds with 412 HTTP requests.
412.
Oh, they're getting college.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually a really successful business in the UK. And Ling, the owner of this business, actually built this entire site herself. And like, if you look at the code, it's kind of impressive. So, but the thing that's most impressive to me is like all of the compression and everything that is done on this site. I mean, she's using CDN, she's doing everything right. The fact that she can get a load time under 4 seconds with all of that, like 400 HTTP requests, it's pretty incredible. And I think like 3/4 of that is image files. So it's pretty huge. But obviously looking at this, you're like, oh, yeah, she's using a lot of JavaScript. There's a lot of GIFs. There's, she's breaking some of those rules. But I think she's also looking at it like, you know, maybe she doesn't have mobile users, but people are coming to her site. People are coming to her site as desktop users, and so maybe she's not worried about mobile. And she knows her audience. She's built this audience that enjoy this site. She's doing that well. It might make most people a little bit crazy to look at.
Yeah, this is like epileptic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, you scroll down, I mean, this just keeps going.
It's like seizure inducing.
There's no surprise that this is like 300 something image files. So,
I can trust Lane.
The internet's never lie.
so,
Oh, she has a mobile site.
there you go.
Holy cow.
Where'd you find that? I still don't
Wow.
see it.
I
Oh, you tried it on your phone?
Yeah, it's awesome. She's writing looks like an ICBM.
Oh.
There you go. Okay, let's get this off the screen.
While you do that, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
What tool do you use to objectively measure what the load time is? Since obviously that's going to vary a lot based on your connection. What tool do you use to get that objective figure?
I think the best one is webpagetest.org. But I also use tools.medium.com, and I've used GT metrics. They're all good. And then the other thing that I use, because I want to make sure that I'm meeting Google's guidelines, is PageSpeed Insights from Google. So those are the tools that I would recommend using. There's a couple more, probably.
Oh, you can see just on the developer tools within Google, you get a
Right, but that's all going to be
Yeah.
based on your connection speed.
yeah, it's based on your connection
So-
speed, but you'll get a good
Yeah.
proportional feel.
The cool thing about those tools, and that's good, like using the timeline feature in developer tools, is you can also look at, you know,
Where's the time to be spent?
individual, right, and that's good. I don't recommend using just one tool to do this. I would look at all of them. I would use developer tools, especially where you're working. I mean, I'm not a developer, so usually I'm just saying, well, this is slow, this is slow, this is slow. Okay, you guys fix this. So that's where I'm coming from. But especially like if you're looking at where can I optimize this code, then I think that's a good idea. But you want to use a combination of them, because I don't think any of them are 100% there. The other thing you want to do on webpagetest.org, they have an option where you can choose a mobile device as the user agent to run the test.
And they've got some network shaping options
Mhm.
there, right?
You can choose 3G, 2G. There's a whole drop-down menu for choosing different options. And I'd recommend testing all of those things. I mean, the other thing on that Mount to Notice one, on mobile, that site was loading in 22 seconds. And that's really bad. After I did all that optimization work, I got it down to 4. And, you know, without like redesigning their site and building the CSS and JavaScript differently, I don't think it's really going to get much better than that. So I think that's basically, and I think they're happy with that. I don't think that Google's going to ding you for being a couple of seconds over. But like, if your site takes 10 or 15 or 20 seconds to load, you're probably going to have a harder time ranking if your competitors are loading in 3 or 2 or 1. So if you're in a really non-competitive keyword space, then it might not matter at all because there's nobody competing. But as a general rule, like if you're e-commerce or you're doing lead generation, you're probably in a competitive keyword space. So, okay. Well, I was thinking we would find someone's site, test it out. So does anybody want to volunteer for that?
Free guinea pig time.
Well, we've used this one a couple times today. Try hamstudy.org.
Yeah, because it's small. Yeah. Well, there's no JavaScript, no CSS. Actually, I recently built the site for dialogue,
Oh, that's awesome.
so it's very fast.
Yeah, study.
Hamstudy.org.
This. Yeah.
Did you buy the extra kit?
Fast 3G connection. Sometimes it does this.
You just have to keep retrying, or do you have to?
Yeah. Sometimes I wait a couple minutes if it's not going, or refresh the page and try it again. Not really sure. Oh, and another thing, I mean, depending on where your audience is and where your servers are, you can adjust these settings. Kingdom doesn't have as many options as other services, but it's generally a good idea to see, how's your page loading for your target audience. It's global, and just test a bunch of spots on the board and see. If you're using a CDN, that will definitely help with that. If you've got a global audience, we're just going to wait on this.
It's just starting up this time.
Okay, can you guys see that?
Can you make it a little bigger?
You can do Control Plus.
So there we are. 7 seconds to first view. So not horrible, but not awesome. Kind of.
Especially because there's only like 2 images on the board.
Okay. So let's see. I like to look at content breakdown. So 36% of your load is images. There's 9 images. CSS, JavaScript, HTML. Font is 2 or 26.
What host is it on? Do you know?
I don't recall. It's my buddy's site. He's out here, but I think it is. I think there's a CDN in front of it. What's the free CDN? There's
Cloudflare?
Yeah, I think he's got Cloudflare in front of it.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean,
It's just hosted. It's hosted on a box at Exhibition up in Salt Lake. It's actually got a dedicated hardware box.
So yeah, JavaScript, not surprisingly, is the biggest in terms of file size. So let's go into this. So this is the waterfall view. This is kind of like the timeline, but not exactly. If you go back to the other page, you can actually click on the timeline link there, and it will open up a timeline for that user agents session that was shown. So just looking at this. CSS is running first. That's always a good thing. Right here we've got some JavaScript though that's coming up here. Generally you'll want to have the JavaScript all below the CSS. Even if the JavaScript is in the header, it's good to have all the CSS at the top so that the page will start rendering and then the JavaScript below. Because if the user sees that the page is loading, it's going to be a better user experience. And they're okay with waiting if they see something happen. So that's a good thing.
Can you go back up a little bit to see what the colored box means? So green is telling you to first byte. After you start the request, how long until you got the first byte from the server?
Yeah, there's the first byte right here. 1.6.
So the longer green bars are during the. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, that's the.
So green is the time for the server to respond. You make the request, and you're waiting for the server to respond. Whereas DNS is pretty
Like in the case of that image, we waited almost 2 seconds before the server even said, I'm going to now fill that request for you.
Yeah. And let's see if it's I can never remember the let's see.
So how did you teach yourself to read these? Did you just kind of like So much practice,
A lot of practice, yeah. I mean, I started doing this really like a year and a half ago.
Okay.
When I was, I work full-time at a law firm, and their website when I first got there was loading in 13 seconds. And that made me a little crazy, so I wanted to make it faster, and so I started learning all of these things, basically teaching myself. But there are like Google Forms and their support sections on PHP Insights is good. It tends to be really technical. So what I usually do is I go in there and look at it, and then I Google all the words that I don't know, and then figure out what I'm doing. And that's basically what I do with everything. But there's also, on Udacity, there's a tutorial actually from Google about increasing page speed.
What's it called, Udacity?
Yeah. And that is actually really good. It's very more technical than I'm used to, but that was okay. And that was really good. It talked a lot about the document object model. It goes into like how to structure it better for loading time, and talking about like, if you've got child elements of a CSS class or something that you've got kind of the dependent elements, I guess is a better word for that, then it's going to slow down your time and things like that.
Okay.
So it's really good. It goes into a lot of those really granular things in CSS. So I highly recommend that. It's like 6 hours, but it's really, really good. It might be a little bit slow paced. So what I do sometimes is like skip ahead in the video tutorials, because they'll talk about something and kind of repeat themselves. So
Are those all online, or is there a download option?
yeah, they're online. I don't know. Maybe Udacity has a mobile
If you
app
can
or
find a
something.
download, then one trick I've used is throw them into VLC and speed up to like 1.5.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
boring parts. Slow it down when they start talking
Yeah,
about meat.
and that's one of the great features of lynda.com is you can speed up the video, and I pretty much do that every time. But yeah, that's another good one. They don't directly have something about HB, but they have some tutorials about HTML and CSS and things that do talk about making it faster and mummification, things like that. There's also a book called Performance Websites, I think is the title. Steve, I can't remember his last name now. That's a really good book. He's a developer. He goes into a lot of those things.
What was that called?
High Performance Websites, I'm pretty sure is the Souders, Steve Souders, I think is his name. I had a concussion about a month and a half ago, so sometimes my memory's not quite up to par.
That's doing okay though.
I am.
Your page speed seems low.
Good to know.
You should have seen it pre-concussion.
It's lasting 20 seconds to load.
Well, hopefully not. I'm doing a lot better than I was. Okay, so we've got this here. Interesting. So this is why I recommend doing it on multiple services, because you're going to get different, well, and this is also desktop. That's the difference. On web page test, we ran a mobile test. And that's why, that's probably the biggest reason this is taking 7 seconds. It's probably pretty fast on desktop. So yeah, he's under a second. So on desktop, this looks really good. On mobile, not so much. So that, and especially where Google has changed those ranking factors, it's a big deal to improve on mobile. And that's why I said like anything you can do to like minimize or eliminate JavaScript from mobile is a good thing. And then compressing those images, it's good for desktop too, but it's crucial for mobile. So, and this is kind of the same thing. The nice thing about Kingdom too is it gives you the file size right next to the request. So we can look at this, and that's one of my favorite things about this.
Can it export?
Kingdom?
Yeah, can you export this to like CSV?
Those file sizes and all that.
I don't think you can. I think you can do that on Widgets, so. I've never actually done it. I usually screenshot everything and save it, but you probably could put it into a CSV. And then, oh, and the other thing is on developer tools in Chrome, you can actually save a timeline view. Like if you open up the developer tools and then reload the page, there's an option. I'm used to two-finger right-clicking.
Oh, sorry.
How do you right-click on?
Just bottom right.
Okay, there we go. We go to timeline, and you might know this already. You hit record and then refresh the page, and it will record the timeline render for the page. So let's.
Thank you.
As an example. Yeah, no problem. So when this is done, just stop the recording, and then you've got a saved timeline, and then you can open that up in Chrome anytime and look at it. But just as an example, I know on Thursday, Joseph Scott was talking about webpagetest.org. Did you go to that?
I didn't go to that one.
Anybody go to that? Okay.
I looked at the tool briefly before picking what I was going to go to, and
Okay.
I just didn't think of
So this is the timeline. This is basically what you get in developer tools. It just it's not really
it. Didn't do it in the first place.
anyway, but you can download that and save it. So that's another way to do
Does that show file sizes at all, or is that just response timing?
I don't know. That shows file size.
Just the title of that.
Here it's showing milliseconds to the right, and
What if you hover over the files?
There we go.
Yeah, how's it downloaded? This timing though. Yeah, size and depth of bytes.
see there. So anyway, that's a great tool to test for mobile. None of the others have really an option to say mobile versus desktop. That's why I think this tool is a little bit better, because it can show you mobile. And that's a bigger deal than it used to be. Any other questions? 'Cause I think we're a little bit over, but.
Thanks, Dustin.